Hey, Mark Clark here, author of The Problem of God, and we're exploring the major questions that skeptics have toward Christianity. One of the major ones is the problem of the Bible. People look at it and they say it's not historical, it's not based on evidence, it contradicts itself, it's full of ridiculous. You can't basically trust it. It's just made up stories about Jesus, and so people have written it off. But what we got to understand is, from a historical vantage point, is scholars look in and they say it's the most trusted document in antiquity, because when we look at other documents from that time, Aristotle's Poetics or Caesar's Gallic Wars, things that we totally trust. We got to understand there's like 5 copies of those manuscripts that we can compare and contrast, written 5 to 1400 years after the events, and historians totally trust them. When it comes to the New Testament, they were written between 40 and 60 years after the events, and there's 25,000 manuscripts that we actually are able to compare and contrast and be able to see that there's very little difference in all of these manuscripts. So it's hugely trusted, even from a secular standpoint, from a museum standpoint. That's one issue. The second issue is that people who say, well, you know, they contradict, you know, if you go on reddit.com, there's all kinds of people saying, well, there's this contradiction and that contradiction. But the reality is the Bible's not full of contradictions. Sometimes there's a way of reading it that we might misunderstand, because the Bible's not written like modern biographies, for instance. So the Gospels share different things from different angles. For instance, people point out, well, one Gospel says there was 2 angels at the resurrection and tomb, and then another Gospel says there was 1. Ergo, you know, kick the Bible out, it's full of contradictions. But the reality is one of the Gospels is telling you how many angels were there, 2. The other Gospel is telling you how many angels spoke. And so it says, well, this one angel spoke. But it doesn't mean there wasn't 2 angels there. It's just honing in on a different reality. People point out, well, Judas, one book says that he hung himself, and another book says that his guts spilled all over this land. But the reality is those aren't contradictions. He hung himself for a time, and then he was cut down or fell from a tree, and his guts spilled all over land. These aren't things where you go, oh my goodness, let's throw the Bible out. The reality is, consistently, of all the tens of thousands of historical claims, archaeological claims that the Bible makes, over and over again, it's been vindicated. There was a season at the universities where people used to say that there was this claim in John 5 about this pool, and that this pool wasn't there, and John's lying, and the historicity of John was called into question, and everyone drop-kicked their Bibles and walked away from it. And then 100 years later, they did some more digging, and they found that actual pool exactly described as the Gospel of John. And so you have a generation of people who walked away from their Bible when all it took was a little more digging. And over and over and over again, the Bible's actually been shown to be true. And so we have to ask the question, when it presents things about Jesus, people say, oh, it contradicts, or it's just whitewashing Jesus. It's presenting him as this hero, and it's not dealing with reality. But the reality is, as many scholars have pointed out, is there's all kinds of counterproductive content in the Gospels that if they were making it up about Jesus, they would totally leave it out. Things like people coming to Jesus and saying, do you know when you're coming back? And him saying, no, only the Father knows. And people are like, but aren't you God? Don't you know everything? He's like, yes, I know everything. So when are you coming back? I have no idea. Take that out of the story, because that's making your hero look like he doesn't know stuff. Or when he's sweating in the garden and he's saying, Father, take this cup from me. Don't make your hero look like he's scared. Don't make your hero look like he's questioning at the end about this mission. Just take that part out, delete it, make him look like he knows what he's doing. When he goes into a village and it says he couldn't heal anybody, don't put that in. Over and over and over, there's counterproductive content where if the gospel writers were just making this up, they would take it out and they would make everything perfect. They would never write anything that would cause you to go, is this identity of Jesus really real? But scholars have come in and they said, no, this is just actually what it is. And there was all kinds of people in that community that would have been able to say this event never happened, because, see, what you want to do if you're creating a story, you're making up a myth, you're making up a religion, is wait till all the eyewitnesses are dead. Then you can say anything, because no one will say, well, I was alive and that never happened. But the fact that the Gospels are written anywhere between 35, 40 years to 70 years, they're all still alive. So there'd be villages that would say, he never fed 5,000 people. He never, you know, these thousands of pigs never drowned. He never did this, he never did. But the reality is the gospel writers actually write in names. And they say, you want to know, Alexander and Rufus and, all of these names that are written in them. And many scholars point out the fact that the reason they're doing that is because they're saying, go and ask them. these people are still alive. And you can go and verify what I'm claiming about Jesus. And so the reality is, if they had made all these historical claims and they never happened, the Gospels never would have gone anywhere. Everyone would have read them and said, this is all mythology, but they didn't. And so scholars today look at that and they say, these are actually very trusted documents. And so the question for you is, as Augustine said, the Bible is the face of God for us now. Challenge yourself. Instead of looking at the church or Christians and saying, oh, I'm going to write Christianity off because of what I've heard, open up the Gospels, open up the New Testament, actually read the story, the whole Bible, and ask the question, do I see God in this? And what does this mean, not only historically as a skeptic, but personally for my life? And I know for me, reading the Bible is actually where I met God. He spoke to me through the scriptures themselves as an 18-year-old kid, sitting, smoking a pack of cigarettes, sitting outside my house, reading the Bible itself. And that's where I actually met Jesus. So I would challenge you to do the same.